Have you ever just looked at the global economy and felt like there's some kind of hidden pattern to all the chaos? Well, today we're diving into a really radical idea, capitalism's hidden pulse. It's a massive 50-year wave that some people believe explains pretty much everything, from the dot-com boom all the way back to the Great Depression. You know how it is. The economy feels chaotic, right? There are booms, busts, sudden crises that seem to come out of nowhere. But what if it isn't random? What if there is a kind of hidden rhythm to economic history, a predictable pulse beating just beneath all that noise? The theory we're digging into today says absolutely yes. It points to this incredibly powerful, predictable cycle of boom and bust. But here's the thing. It's not a cycle that lasts a few years. We're talking about one that spans entire generations. It's like an economic supercycle. And this is where the story gets really compelling. The person who first discovered this pattern, he was a Soviet economist. And for his discovery, he paid the ultimate price. So this isn't just some dry economic theory, It's a story about forbidden knowledge. So to really get a handle on this theory, we first have to understand the man who saw it. Let's get into section 1, the man who saw waves, the tragic genius behind it all. So his name was Nikolai Kondratiev, and back in the 1920s, he was this brilliant director at Moscow's Institute of Conjuncture, which was basically a think tank for studying business cycles. Now, this was during the Soviets' new economic policy, a pretty brief moment of intellectual freedom, and Kondratiev used that freedom to say something totally radical, something that challenged core Marxist beliefs. He argued that capitalism wasn't just headed for one final, permanent collapse. No, instead, he said it had these incredible, self-correcting, long-term cycles built right into it. The timeline of his life is it's deeply tragic. In 1925, he publishes his masterpiece, The Major Economic Cycles. But because his ideas went directly against Stalinist dogma, he was arrested only 5 years later. Then, in 1938, he was executed. I mean, think about that. He was killed for an economic theory. That tells you just how powerful, how dangerous his ideas were considered at the time. So what was this world-shaking theory he died for? Let's peel back the layers and unveil the mechanics of what we now call the K-wave, or the 50-year economic cycle. All right, so it's called the Kondratiev wave, or K-wave for short. And the big idea is this. It's a long wave cycle lasting somewhere between, say, 48 and 60 years. Now, the key here is that these waves aren't caused by random external shocks like wars. Nope, they are built into the capitalist system itself, driven by what he called the massive renovation of basic capital goods. In plain English, that means a complete society-wide technological and infrastructural overhaul, a total reboot. He broke this huge wave down into 2 pretty simple phases. You can think of it like seasons. First, you have the rising wave, which is like the economic springtime. This is a long period of high growth, rising prices, and just general good times and expansion. But that's always followed by the downward wave, the economic winter. This is a period of stagnation, falling prices, and often major social upheaval. So what kicks off a new economic spring? What gets the whole cycle going again? Well, in Kondratiev's own words, the scientific technical discoveries and inventions remain ineffective until the necessary economic conditions for their application are created. What he's saying is you can have a revolutionary invention like the steam engine or the microchip, and it might exist for years, but it only gets rolled out on a massive scale when the old economic system has totally run its course and is just ripe for a complete renovation. But this theory, it goes way beyond just economics. And that brings us to what is, without a doubt, its most shocking implication, its connection to war and revolution. I mean, think about the biggest conflicts in modern history. We're talking the World Wars, the Napoleonic Wars, major revolutions. We tend to look at them as these unique political events, driven by specific leaders and ideologies, but Kondratiev posed a really radical question. Are they actually random? His answer was a definitive no. He argued that these major wars and revolutions are the result of the economic cycle, not the cause. See, during that rising wave, as economies are expanding and competing for new markets, new resources, tensions just build and build to an almost unbearable level. He believed that the most devastating conflicts are simply the final violent release of all that accumulated economic energy. It just completely turns history on its head. Okay, so this is a fascinating historical theory for sure. But what does it mean for us, right here, right now? Let's try to answer that by asking a big question. Are we in a K-wave? It's time to apply this century-old theory to today. Okay, so remember, every single wave is powered by a new engine of change. The old waves that Kondratiev studied were driven by things like steam, railways, and steel. Now, the most recent wave, which a lot of theorists say started in the early 1980s, has clearly been driven by information technology, the internet, and now AI and biotech. The technology is totally different, but the underlying pattern, well, it might just be the same. And when you actually put the patterns side by side, it's kind of spooky how well they line up. Kondratiev's spring phase, that was the massive railway expansion in the 1800s. And our version, you could say, was the explosive dot-com boom of the 90s. His winter phase was the Great Depression. Well, a lot of people would point to the long stagnation after the 2008 financial crisis as our modern equivalent. And that great capital renovation, Back then, it was iron and steel replacing wood. Today, you could easily argue it's the massive shift from fossil fuels to green energy and from human labor to AI automation. The parallels are pretty hard to ignore. So if we accept this framework, even just as a possibility, it leads to a really powerful question about what's next. So it's time for our final thought, riding the next wave. Let's just have a final reminder of the time scale we are on here. The average length of a K-wave is about 50 years. So if the last one really began in the early 1980s with the PC revolution, well, you can do the math. We are living right at the turning point, the end of one great wave and the potential beginning of a whole new one. And this leaves us with the million-dollar question for our future. If the information age wave is ending, what is the massive basic capital renovation that's going to trigger the next great 50-year boom? Is it going to be fully realized AI? Maybe a revolution in biotechnology and genetic engineering? The commercialization of space? According to Kondratiev's theory, whatever it is, it's probably already here, just waiting for the right economic conditions to come along and change the world all over again.